You ever have one of those nights where you're just trying to get through your shift, and suddenly you end up questioning everything? That was me last New Year's Eve. I was working this wedding gig downtown, a fancy affair at one of those historic hotels where the bathrooms are marble and even the air smells expensive. I didn't know the couple, obviously. I was just there through the catering company I freelance with, sometimes when rent's tight. Usually it's boring. You set the food out, refill the charcuterie boards, keep guests tipsy and fed. Smile, nod, don't exist. But this wedding, this one was different. First off, the couple was stupid beautiful. She looked like a Vogue model, all satin and diamonds, and a mile-long train. The groom looked like the kind of guy you'd expect to marry someone like her. Perfect tan, clean-cut jaw, tall, confident, the whole vibe. I remember thinking, damn, some people really do live on another planet. But then, halfway through the night, he pulled me aside. No warning, no introduction. Just came up while I was clearing a stack of empty cocktail glasses and said, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" I thought maybe he needed something. A refill. A napkin. Directions to the bathroom. Instead, he led me around the corner, behind a curtain that separated the ballroom from a little staff alcove where we kept extra trays and coats. And then he just stood there, not saying anything, not smiling, just breathing like he'd been holding his breath all night. "Sorry," he said finally, running a hand through his hair. "I just needed to get away from all that for a minute." I nodded, awkwardly holding a tray of shrimp skewers. "Totally. I get it." "I'm Jake, by the way." I blinked. I'm Eli. I'm just catering, though." He smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "I know." I didn't know what to say to that. There was a pause. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Do you believe in second thoughts?" I didn't know how to answer that. I mean, I'd had second thoughts about pretty much every job, relationship, and pair of pants I'd ever bought. But that wasn't what he meant. He glanced back toward the ballroom. The sound of laughter and glasses clinking drifted in from the other side of the curtain. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said quietly. "Everyone thinks I've got it all figured out. But I don't. I feel like I'm watching my life happen from 10 feet away." That hit me harder than it should have. I didn't say anything. I just listened. Then he looked at me again, and this time his eyes lingered. "You're probably wondering why I'm telling you all this." I shrugged. "Kind of." He smiled again, softer this time. "You looked like you weren't pretending. Everyone else is putting on a show. You were the only person in that room who seemed real." I didn't know what to do with that. I mean, I was just trying to make it to midnight without spilling champagne on a bridesmaid. But something in his voice made it feel like this moment mattered, like I mattered. He reached up, almost touched my shoulder, then stopped. "Sorry," he said again. "I just needed to say it to someone who wasn't part of the show." And with that, he turned and walked back through the curtain, back into the noise and sparkle and people who thought they knew him. I stayed in that little alcove for a long time, just standing there in the quiet. I thought that would be the end of it. But later, after the countdown, after the kiss, after the sparklers and the fake smiles, he came back. And this time, he wasn't just looking for someone to talk to. After the countdown, after the champagne toast and the confetti settled in tiny glittering piles on the floor, I was back near the buffet table, replenishing trays and trying not to spill anything on the carpet that cost more than my apartment. That's when I saw him again, Jake, the groom. But this time, he wasn't laughing with his groomsmen or checking in with the photographer. He was standing in the corner near the dessert table, eyes scanning the crowd, and then he caught mine, just like before, that intensity. Only now there was a little urgency there too. He waved me over. I froze. Should I? Could I? I set down the tray of mini eclairs and walked toward him. "Thanks for, listening earlier," he said softly, so nobody else could hear. "I didn't. I just needed that." I nodded. "No problem. Really." He shifted, like he wasn't sure how to be here, not just at his own wedding, but standing in front of me. "I know this sounds weird," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "but I can't stop thinking about you since Earlier. My stomach flipped. Earlier? The alcove? The way he had looked at me? You can't stop thinking about me? I asked, trying to keep my voice even, but failing miserably. I could feel it trembling. Jake took a deep breath. Yeah, I know I'm supposed to be focused on the bride, on the night, all of it, but I can't. You're different. Not fake. Not performing. Not like everyone else here. And then he did something that made the world shrink to just the two of us. He reached out and touched my hand. Lightly. Tentatively. Just one hand, but my body reacted like I'd been electrocuted. I swallowed hard. Jake, Shh, he said, putting a finger to his lips, still holding my hand. Just feel this for a second. Just be here with me, not there, not them, not all of it. The ballroom music swelled. Someone shouted something about the bride and groom's first dance, but none of it reached us. His hand squeezed mine gently. His eyes were locked on mine, searching, daring, honest. I shouldn't, but I can't stop. I just can't. I wanted to pull away. I should have pulled away. I wanted to scream at myself to run back to the catering station, to blend into the shadows. But I didn't. I couldn't. I feel it too, I whispered, before I could think better of it. That made him smile. Finally, a real smile, and I saw something I wasn't expecting. Relief. Gratitude. Desire. All tangled together. For a moment, time paused. Glittering confetti was frozen in midair. Champagne glasses were suspended like ornaments. The music was just a distant hum. Jake leaned closer, and the scent of his cologne hit me. A clean, sharp scent, almost intoxicating. I don't know how to do this, he murmured, voice low, tense. I don't even know what this is. Maybe we don't have to know yet, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Just here. Just this. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, then let go of my hand. Step by step, he leaned closer. And then, like a spark catching a dry forest floor, everything shifted. And at that moment, I realized nothing about this night, about him, about the wedding, about me, would ever be the same again. The music in the ballroom shifted again, something slow, syrupy, romantic, and I realized it was the couple's first dance. The entire room was watching, yet in the corner of the coat-room adjacent hallway, it was just us. The glow from the chandeliers leaked through the half-open doors, painting our faces with warm light. Jake leaned a little closer, just enough that I could feel the heat from his chest. I shouldn't be here, he said, voice low. I'm married. Everyone's looking, everyone's expecting me to be happy. His words faltered. But right now, I don't care about that. I just needed to find you. I swallowed hard, heart hammering in a way that made my ears ring. I wanted to tell him to stop, to go back to the party, to save himself. But I couldn't. Something about the raw honesty in his voice held me still. Then, I'm here, I said softly. I'm not going anywhere. For a few seconds, we just stood there, staring at each other. The world narrowed to the space between us. And then, almost imperceptibly, he brushed his hand against mine again, lightly, teasingly, as if testing a line he wasn't sure he should cross. My fingers tingled where his touched mine. I could feel the pulse in his arm, the warmth radiating through the thin fabric of his tuxedo sleeve. I don't even know what I want, he admitted, eyes darting away for a second, as if even speaking the truth was dangerous. Then back at me, wide-eyed. I just needed you to know He stopped, swallowed, breathed, and the intensity in his gaze made it clear. Words were secondary. His actions would say the rest. I felt it too. That pull, that electricity buzzing in the space between us, a current neither of us could deny. My own voice was barely a whisper. I know. And then he leaned in, just a fraction. just close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath, the slight tremble in his hand brushing against mine. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. But it was something heavier, something intimate, stolen, dangerous, something that made me aware of every nerve ending in my body, every heartbeat loud enough to echo in the hallway. We stayed like that for a few moments. That felt like hours. The distant laughter of wedding guests, the music, the clinking glasses, it was all just background noise. The only thing that mattered was the proximity, the electricity, the understanding. Then Jake pulled back slightly. "I can't," he said, voice tight. "I can't stay here. Not now." But he didn't move away entirely. He just hovered. The tension didn't break. It only thickened. He pressed his hand lightly to the back of my wrist. A subtle claim, a tether, a reminder that the night wasn't over, that the story wasn't finished, that we weren't finished. I swallowed again, the words catching in my throat. "Then we figure it out later," I whispered. My voice barely carried, but he heard. I knew he did. A shaky laugh escaped him, and for a moment it was real, vulnerable. "Yeah," he said, almost to himself. Then he looked back toward the ballroom. "I should go back." And just like that, he stepped back through the curtain, into the noise and lights, leaving me alone in the hallway. My fingers tingled where his hand had been, and my mind was spinning. The night hadn't even hit midnight yet, and I already knew I'd never forget it. I went back to my catering station, shaking slightly, trying to act like nothing had happened. But I couldn't stop smiling, couldn't stop thinking about him, couldn't stop wondering what would happen when the night ended, when the guests went home, and when the masks of obligation were finally off. Because the truth was, I was already hooked, and I could tell, somewhere deep down, that he was too. The reception was winding down. Guests had loosened ties, heels were kicked off, and champagne glasses were half empty, sloshing gently on the tables. Music had shifted to something more upbeat, a few brave couples still trying to dance in the middle of the polished floor. I was moving trays of desserts to the side when I felt that familiar presence. Jake. He appeared near the dessert table, not smiling, not laughing, not performing. Just him, looking a little rumpled, like he hadn't been able to fully enjoy the night either. Our eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between us. The night wasn't over. Not for either of us. He gestured subtly, a nod toward the side hallway where the coat room was. I felt my stomach twist, a mixture of nerves and anticipation. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was wrong. Married, his vows, the whole wedding still humming around us. And yet, I couldn't stop myself. My legs moved before my mind could protest. We met in the dim hallway, away from the chatter and glitter. The air smelled faintly of perfume, flowers, and the lingering hint of champagne. He leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets, posture tense but deliberate. He wasn't smiling. He was serious, vulnerable, honest. And for some reason, that scared me more than anything. "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, voice low. "I shouldn't be feeling this. I shouldn't be standing here with you. But I can't help it." I swallowed hard. "I feel it too." For a second, it was just us. The room, the wedding, the obligations, they didn't exist. There was only the space between us, charged with something neither of us could define yet. He reached out, a hand trembling slightly, and brushed mine. A small, tentative gesture, but it sent a jolt straight through me. His gaze searched mine, questioning, daring, exposing. "Do you want this?" he whispered. I hesitated. Couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't. I wasn't supposed to answer. And yet, I couldn't stop the words from leaving my mouth. Yes. The tension between us snapped. He leaned closer, just enough for me to feel the warmth radiating off his body. The brush of his lips against my cheek was light, tentative, a warning, a promise. And then he stopped, breath hitching, eyes dark, searching mine for permission, for understanding, for something that words couldn't convey. We stayed there, suspended in that moment, until the distant countdown to midnight started echoing from the ballroom. Sparkling glasses clinked, laughter rose, and somewhere in the distance, the bride's heels clicked on the floor. And still, he was there. Close. Present. Undeniable. Then he pulled back slightly, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath all night. "I should go back," he said. But even as he spoke, his hand lingered near mine. "But we'll figure this out. Later." I nodded. Couldn't speak. My chest felt tight, my heart racing, but I understood. That night, something had begun. Something dangerous. Something exhilarating. Something neither of us could ignore. And as he disappeared back into the ballroom, I knew, without a doubt, that my life had just tilted in a direction I could never have predicted. By the time the last of the guests had filtered out, the ballroom looked like a war zone of confetti, half-empty champagne flutes, and discarded napkins. The music had long since stopped, leaving only the hum of the air conditioning and the faint clatter of leftover dishes being cleared. I was stacking trays, tired, sticky from a long night, when I heard footsteps behind me. "Eli?" I turned. "Jake." This time, there was no hesitation, no distance. The nervous energy, the restraint, the careful boundaries. It was gone. He was exhausted, eyes dark, tense, and yet there was that same raw intensity I'd felt earlier. I can't go back there," he said quietly. "Not tonight. Can we somewhere else?" His voice trembled slightly, like he wasn't sure he had permission even to ask. I swallowed, nodding. "Yeah, we can, somewhere private." He led me down a side corridor I hadn't noticed before, past the staff lockers and storage closets, to a small utility room, dim, bare, just enough space for the two of us, but away from everything. It smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and linen, a mundane, safe little bubble. He leaned against the wall, letting out a breath, and for the first time, the mask he'd worn all night, the polished groom, the composed man in control, slipped. I'm not supposed to feel this," he admitted. "Not here, not now, but I can't help it." I took a step closer. "Neither can I." He glanced at me, eyes searching, unsure. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out, brushing a hand along my arm, tracing the line down my shoulder. It wasn't rough, it wasn't aggressive, but the contact, light as it was, sent a jolt through me I couldn't control. "I shouldn't," he whispered, leaning just close enough that I could feel the heat of his chest, the small tremble of his fingers. "I really shouldn't." "Shh," I said softly, placing my hand over his. "It's okay. Just this moment." His lips parted slightly, breath hitching. He closed the distance slowly, almost painfully slow, until his forehead rested against mine. Just that, the closeness, the warmth, the shared breath, was enough to make the world outside vanish. Then, finally, the first brush of his lips against mine. Gentle, questioning, hesitant, and yet it carried everything he hadn't said aloud all night. Uncertainty, longing, the thrill of doing something forbidden. My body responded instinctively, leaning in, matching the small pressure, letting the tension build between us until it became almost unbearable. He pulled back slightly, just enough to look into my eyes, and whispered, "You have no idea how long I've wanted you." "I think I do," I whispered back. "And I've wanted you, too." The room was silent but for our breathing, hearts hammering, a tension that neither of us could break. And I knew, in that small, unremarkable utility room, that everything, every choice, every decision, every step I'd taken tonight had led to this. He leaned in again, and this time I let the kiss deepen. Hesitant at first, then more sure, more desperate. Everything that had been pent up, the stress of the wedding, the excitement, the longing, it all poured into that kiss. And as the clock ticked past midnight, somewhere out in the world, in that little hidden corner of a grand ballroom, the world narrowed to just us. We stayed like that for a long moment, just letting the tension and heat of the night settle around us. I could feel Jake's heartbeat through the fabric of his tuxedo jacket, rapid and irregular, mirroring my own. Every brush of his hand against mine, every small shift in our bodies, was a spark, igniting a fire I hadn't expected in a utility room tucked behind a wedding reception. Finally, he pulled back just slightly, resting his forehead against mine. "Eli, we're crossing a line," he whispered. His voice was raw, vulnerable. I'm married, and you're supposed to be just catering." "I know," I said softly, "and I'm not asking for anything permanent. Not now. Just this moment." His eyes searched mine, wide and uncertain, like he was balancing on the edge of something dangerous. Then, slowly, he nodded, as if letting himself accept that truth. His hands found my waist, tentative, exploratory, and I leaned into him, closing the gap. It started with gentle touches, hesitant, almost shy, hands on arms, tracing shoulders. But soon, the desire took over. The tension from the wedding, the adrenaline from being pulled aside, the forbidden thrill of being so close, it all converged in a way that left us both breathless. Our lips met again, deeper this time, urgent, seeking, as if we were trying to memorize each other before the world forced us apart. I could feel him shiver, a subtle reaction that mirrored my own. Our bodies pressed together, hearts racing, breaths mingling. I realized I didn't want to stop. He didn't want to stop. And for once, the rules, the vows, the expectation of the night, they didn't exist. There was only us. When the kiss finally broke, just for a moment, he rested his forehead against mine again. "Eli, we can't get caught," he whispered, voice low. "Not now. Not here." "I know," I said, heart hammering. "We'll be careful." He nodded, taking a shaky breath. And in that small utility room, surrounded by the scent of cleaning supplies and fading flowers, we allowed ourselves to explore a closeness that neither of us had expected when the night began. Every touch, every brush of skin against skin was a promise without words, a secret, a thrill, a confession. And as the last guests filed out of the ballroom and the cleaning crew started to sweep up confetti and leftover champagne, we lingered in that moment, suspended between what was forbidden and what felt undeniably right. By the time we finally parted, reluctantly with one last lingering touch, we both knew something had shifted. Something had begun that night, hidden in the shadows behind a wedding reception, and neither of us would ever forget it. We stepped back into the ballroom, a world of glitter, laughter, and music that felt both distant and surreal. Guests were starting to leave, some dancing stubbornly in pairs, some clutching champagne flutes like trophies. The bride was wrapped in hugs and tears, radiant and oblivious. And yet, amid all the chaos, Jake and I moved carefully, almost silently, back to the catering station. No one noticed us. Not the guests. Not the staff. And that was exactly the way it had to be. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile, the kind that held 1,000 things unsaid. I returned it, my heart still racing, still catching in my throat from the intensity of what had just happened. Every brush of his hand, every lingering glance, still burned in my memory. I should probably check on everyone," he said quietly, voice low, cautious. "Yeah," I murmured, trying to sound casual, even though my chest still felt tight. "Make sure they're all happy. You know wedding stuff." He nodded and started moving toward the exit, then paused, looked back. What happened? It stays between us, right?" I nodded firmly. Between us. And with that he was gone, swallowed up by the remaining crowd, leaving me alone in the quiet hum of the cleanup. The adrenaline was still surging through me, leaving me jittery and dizzy, like I'd been running a race I hadn't trained for. I sank into a chair, wiping my hands on my apron, trying to process it all. The rest of the night was a blur. Cleaning tables, stacking trays, packing leftover desserts, sweeping confetti. And through it all, I kept replaying the hallway, the utility room, every glance, every touch. Jake had vanished back into his world. The husband, the groom, the perfect man everyone thought they knew. But a part of him had left something behind. A secret, a spark, a moment that would linger. When the last guest left and the ballroom lights dimmed, I stepped outside, breathing in the cold night air, the fireworks from the city reflecting off the river. The sky was alive with light, color, and sound, but all I could think about was him. That glance, that hand, that kiss, that impossible, forbidden, unforgettable connection. I knew it wasn't over. We'd both return to our lives, resume the roles the world demanded. But that night, New Year's Eve, in a hallway behind a wedding reception, we had crossed into something neither of us would ever forget. Something that would linger in our thoughts, in our hearts, every time we remembered that glittering night, that fleeting, stolen moment. And deep down, I knew I'd see him again. Somehow. And when I did, everything would change.